techniques which is working, that goes on nowadays. So similarly in dermatology also, visual classifier, we all go for telemedicines nowadays. So where there we take a photo, we send it to the her doctor, we feel that is on the other side of the machine, and there the images which we give, those are being scanned, and there a small what do you say, a small diagnosis is done by the machine, and then it is passed to the hospital or the doctor, so that it becomes easier for the doctor to understand. It gives you the size of the patch, it gives you the color of the patch, and seeing all those things, yeah, the ultimate decision is the doctor, but it aids the doctor to give you a result for the images which we give. In dermatology, visual classifiers analyze skin photographs that is given to onto the screen by training diverse dermatological data sets. These model can highly give or identify patterns which is already available due to the variation, size, as well as the texture. That is how do we see using our eyes? What can we feel? That is the same thing what the machine does, and it helps the dermatologist to identify what type of a problem this particular image that is given to them is having. Similarly, pathological also, it is mainly used in histopathology. That is a department where skin cells or all the cells and schedule tissues are being scanned, or it is being under examination. Pathology is nowadays such an important area in the hospital, because whatever is being found on the skin or on the body of a human being, it is anticipated, or it is being checked for whether it is a detection of cancer cell or not. So pathology has to come into. Histopathological slides are incredibly large. We used to, in initial days, whenever we had biology in our school days, we had something like on a microscope, we used to keep the small skin of a onion, and then we used to see the cells, and we used to, there we didn't have any idea about there will be a time when these skin or these cells will be malignant, or it may be benign, using the size or shape of the cells. So that is being found out in pathology. Just imagine in a multi-speciality hospital where there are thousands and thousands of people working, or walking into thousands of patients walking into the hospital day by day in different departments, and in every department the patients are supposed to give a sample of their blood, or of their tissue, of their hair, of their skin, and the histopathological department has to take care all this on time, because this is something which cannot be delayed. Delaying even by 1 hour may be very dangerous for the patient. So it has to be on time. So that is where we come into existence. It is not replacing anyone. Only thing is, it is aiding or it is helping the technicians. Maybe it is the doctors or the radiologist or the lab technicians, how to process further. So these are some things where we are very, very, very important in these fields. Hope it's clear till now. Something new.
It's clear, ma'am.
uh, is this everything known to people, or is this something new which I'm
Most of the things are new to us because it's related to healthcare.
okay.
Most of us are we are not aware of all these things.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you. So, coming to X-ray, you know what is X-ray? We usually used to take it. It's basically 2D projections. CT scan, it's computed tomography. It's again 2D X-ray scans put all together in a 3D volume. Again, MRI, it is magnetic resonance imaging. It goes through a magnetic field. We have already learned in physics how those magnetic fields, it takes the blood and the magnetic field is in the machine, that goes together. Then comes MRA, it is magnetic resonance angiography, again for the heart. PET scan, positron emission tomography. A dye is being put through the person's or the patient's bloodstream, and according to the metabolic activity or the sugar consumption using the radioactive tracers that is being injected, it gives you the picture. It usually are colored. The very right bottom one is a PET scan. Those are colored. But I tell you once again, uh, if the PET scan is nowadays, in all these scans, PET scan is the highest or the costliest. It's not very evident, or it is not so clear that everything will be available on a PET scan. Yes, PET scan gives you very detailed processing, but not everything. Again, there are some things which is visible only on a ultrasound scan. Ultrasound means it is using a sound machine. Okay, going to the next slide. This is again another area in healthcare where deep learning comes into existence. Intelligent wearables and monitoring machines. We all are using smart watches too nowadays. In that, whenever we go for a jog, whenever we go for exercises in gym and everything, there the smart watches, it tries to calculate the oxygen. There are smart watches which gives you the level of oxygen that is available on your system now, on your body now. Real-time analysis goes on. You can see how many steps you have taken, what was the heartbeat, what is the oxygen level, what is the pressure. Again, there are wearable devices which gives you an idea about what is the sugar level. Nowadays there are devices available. Now it's available in China, Japan, where it's not so necessary that you have to inject a syringe, take a little bit of blood, and then find out what is your sugar level. Just by scanning, you put your finger or you put your hand wherever there is a vein into a machine. It's a small machine, something like a vending machine, the machine which checks for the notes in bank, whether it is a ruined note, it is a false note or something. There is a light going on, isn't it? In that, something like that, there is a machine where you put your hand something like this, and just by, it's not touching anywhere, just by passing the line through it or light through it, the technology has gone so far that it gives you the pressure as well as the temperature, the blood sugar level. Even it is not touching you, but still it gives you the content of your blood, how, what all is there, what is your pressure that is available now, what is the sugar level that you're going through, what is the pulse rate it is going through, and similarly so on. So these are some advances in deep learning where it tries to find out how these work. So their intelligent wearables and monitoring machines go on. Raspberry Pi comes into existence. We did a project where a wearable device was was prepared by our students. It was something like a wristband, and it had to be put onto the wrist. It's already commercially available, but we could see how this works, and students did it very well. So it detects anomalies like cardiac arrest as well as sudden drop of blood oxygen. It alerts the patient whenever we've seen and we've heard in many papers and everything, like these devices, when these wearable devices are given or wearable devices are put onto, that is what we initiated in our project. The wearable device is something like a watch. But the person, if he is not capable of, whenever his blood sugar or blood pressure goes down, he is not capable of talking, that 3 seconds, we had given a time limit. Maybe it was 5 seconds, five not, it's about 8 seconds, 8 to 10 seconds. Within that 8 to 10 seconds, the person, if he is not moving, an emergency number, it will be the wearable device will be directly communicating to the emergency number which is linked to this particular wearable device. It may be a hospital, it can be their guardian, or it may be their family member or whoever it is. An emergency, in that emergency, the person will be intimated about the patient not being well. So that is the way things are going on. The internet is all around, IoT is all around, and all these things can be communicated within no time. So again, wearable devices and monitoring, that also comes, and that is also done using deep learning. In our project, deep learning was not used. It didn't need any deep learning. It just wanted a small machine learning method to be used just to analyze the blood sugar. Previously taken blood sugar levels, that was analyzed, and it was predicted that in the next 24 hours, whether this blood sugar will be shooting up, or it will be stable, or it will be going down. And the communication part also, that was done in our project. So here there are, in the small image which I've shown on the very top, there is a headband capturing continuous EEG signals for people for epilepsy tracking when they're sleeping. So it will give an alert. We almost every colleges, in every colleges, students will be doing projects about the driver's drowsiness. Whenever a person is driving, a drunk person is driving, if he is falling asleep, so we take the measurements of our eyes, and if it goes beyond this threshold level, then what happens is that that person, the machine understands that the person is going into a sleep mode, so it will be giving you an alert. Similarly, the headbands here also, it captures continuously the brain signals and tries to find out whether the person or the patient is moving into an epilepsy mode or not. So it will be alerting either by a vibration or by a alert or a sound. Then comes smart watches, or smart glasses, which tracks eye movements for neurological assessments. When we see the Parkinson's patients or the Alzheimer patients, their eyeballs will be continuously flickering. So that flickering can be earlierly detected using the smart glasses. Before itself coming into a very intensive stage, before itself we can find out whether, using the eye movement, we can find out, or whether we can predict whether that person is going to have a neurological problem. Next is chest belts and smart t-shirts. Again, ECG signals. Smart watches and rings, we all are using it. Heavy rates, even the remembering, or everything is blood sugar, blood oxygen is all seen or evidently shown in that. Another is smart socks and shoes, monitoring diet analysis and pressure distribution for the diabetic patients. For the diabetic patients, if the diabetic patient is a patient for so long, after a particular period of time, they leave their, that is known as podiometry. In that podiometry, it is very evidently seen that it is basically a graph, something like a heat graph or a thermal graph, where it is shown using pictures. So that is a pressure that is applied by the toe or the leg. And below the leg, if the diabetic patient is having, in this podiometry, what it does, that is, it gives back you an image where it shows that in that, what we say as kalpati, on that flat area, where is pressure mostly available and where it is not. So a patient who is diabetic for so long, that in podiometry it is evidently seen that there are very less areas where they can feel the sensitivity. They don't have sensitivity throughout the leg. So that is being shown by the smart socks or the shoes. Again, the shoes can have a small resonating, like something like a recliner. What we have on the recliners, it can have something like a small vibrator, which will massage the leg always for the continuous blood flow. It is not a problem in patients like in diabetic. It's not like that. In the diabetic patient, what happens is that why that pressure goes down is that there are some small, what you say is that, again, it's neurons. So those neurons, they stop working, because neurons always work with signals, and those signals should come through the blood. So the blood flow on those leg is very less. It becomes less due to there are blockages in diabetic patients, and so those neurons would get signals. That is why it becomes numb. So these shoes, they help where the signals are less. It gives a small vibration, getting you information, or making the diabetic patient a little more easy for them to walk. Okay, so next comes, these are some wearable devices where healthcare comes into. Now coming to NLP. NLP is natural language processing, and as we already, EHR is electronic health records. So here also in the hospital, there are a lot of data, as I already had mentioned. lot of data, clinical documentation, which has to be automatically transcribed by the doctor-patient conversation in telemedicine and everything. There, natural language processing comes into existence. Information tracking, extraction is needed. High-risk patient population has to be identified. They have to be given priority, and this goes on. Now, similarly, virtual nursing, power chatbots. Again, previous in the just before batch, in this 22 batch, we had a project where telemedicine portal was generated, where there were power chatbots. The patient is not necessarily coming to the doctor. Even the doctor is getting an aid on his machine when, after diagnosing him personally, the patient is being in front of the patient, the doctor is sitting, he can do it offline or online. If he is on offline, there also the doctor has to enter the investigations, what he or she has seen in the portal that is available for the EHR, electronic health record. So this software, what we made, the software, it gives the doctor some intimations of what all test has to be done if the doctor forgets, or if the doctor just these are all possibilities. For example, I'll put it in a very simple way. If a person comes into with coughing, so using cough, it can be pneumonia, it can be just a cold, it can be a blockage on their throat, something like that. So in order to find that, so that the doctor doesn't take everything these are nowadays, this is why we tried this, is that nowadays no investigation that is being done by the doctor should be taken so lightly. The doctor shouldn't be careless, as well as the patient shouldn't take it lightly also. So we try to make a small portal which is available to the doctor. When the doctor writes the investigation, what he has physically seen, onto the text box on his portal, it gives a list of test or list of diagnosis that has to be done based on the previous learning. And the doctor can suggest, or even doctor can add something more, a blood test to be done, or an ECG to be taken, or a treadmill test to be taken, or a medicine to be given, only a medicine to be given, something like that. So those are recommendation systems that is provided to the doctor. So there it needs a lot of natural language processing. That is what I meant by clinical documentation. So that is what being done. Even in virtual nursing also, that is being done. The monitors patient vitals and answers routine health questions there. So the conventional AI agents help monitor chronic patients at home, providing a continuous feedback loop and answering routine medical questions to prevent unnecessary hospital readmissions. You can take the vitals at home, you can put it on the portal. The chatbot or the power chatbots, in consultation with the doctors there, will give you an answer back whether things are normal or not. The patient, if he or she is not able to move out, then this comes into existence. So our deep learning has gone so far that we can do all it at home itself on a single click. One more area where the drug discovery and genomics come into, that is decodes complex DNA patterns to identify disease predispositions and create precision medical therapy. Again, there was one project we did it last time. Again, something related to this very interestingly. Nowadays, after COVID, we have seen that not every patient or every person is, not every medicine is applicable to every person. You all may be experiencing that. So after taking that COVID vaccination, it's not scientifically proved, but still, in an observation, many studies have said that after COVID coming into and after COVID vaccinations being taken, there are some changes in our DNA patterns, in all our patterns. It is very evident that nowadays, after the person who is already gone through majority, I'm not saying all the 100%, but majority people after undergoing COVID, or the patterns or the variants of COVID, they are prone to pulmonary diseases very fast compared to the earlier times. So there is some changes that has happened on our DNA patterns. So we tried in our college, we tried to do a project where we tried to, it was not done extensively, but again it was very interestingly done. We took the compositions of every medicine, maybe about paracetamol, cetirizine, or allergic medicine, something like that. And we tried to put, there are studies going on still, and we tried to match it with some DNA patterns from different people. Okay, so to our wonder, we came to a understanding that not every drug is can be applicable on every people. Not every drug, even paracetamol, there are people who are ineffective with paracetamol. Any number of paracetamols or dolo you take, that won't be applicable on their body. Earlier it used to, but now it is not. So these are all, there are studies going on, still studies are going on. So there is a very long or big scope in this area where drug discovery for a particular type of DNA, what type of a drug can be. Again, drugs are always protein sequences, and those protein sequences will be mapped with the protein sequences or of human, and that can be made into a conclusion that this particular drug cannot be applied, or this particular combination cannot be effective for such and such DNA patterns. So this is another research area where deep learning has to come into, because protein for a particular drug is almost 50 to 55 length long. It is a sequence of strings having means having those chemical compounds like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and everything, and those are all put into a very big string, almost 55 bit long. It's not bit, byte means characters long. And comparing that with each and every DNA, again, DNA has a different pattern. There are DNA always has a different pattern, which all those chromosomes. There are 6 different type of chromosomes available in our body, and those chromosomes have to be mapped with this. There is already a dictionary like book or a document where some chromosomes have been already mapped with some type of patterns. So that, taking that into account, that is a universally something like a ISI marked one. It is universally used dictionary where there is a reference which shows the pattern, and from that we took some samples and we tried to find out. So there are some interesting things coming out there. The patterns, they don't match. The person whose DNA we try to match, those people, they used to say that before COVID these all medicines were applicable and now it is not effective. So that was that cannot be taken into account. That was just a verbal thing, and clinically it has to be proved again. So but we did a project like that, so we can do that. That is, what type of, putting in very simple words, what type of drug or medicine can be used to what type of DNA patterns which will be applicable. This is really needed when treatments for cancer patients are to be done. Not every cancers are similar. Not every medicines can be applicable on cancer patients. So for each and every type, whether it is brain, if you take 10 brain tumor patients, 10 different type of brain tumors will be coming, and different type of medicines will be used for that also. So nowadays it is not a time where you can put a trial and error method on the patient and then find out whether it is applicable or not. So deep learning helps us to find out whether that particular medicine is applicable for that particular DNA pattern of that patient. If it is yes, then it can be given, or else it is no. So there are techniques for that also. These are done. These are going on. So Deep architecture can be used to predict the 3D structure of a protein by the atomic accuracy of the medicine, amino acid sequences in the medicine that is available, and that can be used for matching techniques also. These are some areas where I just wanted to say that why deep learning is so important in healthcare. One is medical imaging and diagnostics. Next one is intelligent wearable and monitoring. Third one is natural language processing and electronic health records. And the fourth one is drug discovery and genomics. Now, keeping all these there are some challenges and ethical considerations. As we all know, whenever AI comes into existence, anything can be duplicated. I think I have 10 more minutes, isn't it, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, I'll finish it on time. Okay, so I'm into my last slides. So there are some things which has to be really taken care of. We say that enormous data. In the previous slides, I already said about the drug, about the DNA patterns, and all those things. In English films, we might have fictionist English films. We might have seen that, but if you get a DNA pattern, that can be misused. Yes, it is really done. It can be really done. A very sharp or a very intelligent person can take someone's DNA, it can be redefined, done some cloning, everything can be done. Yes. So there are some challenges as well as ethical considerations when we really work on all such sort of data. As AI engineers and researchers, we must really address the hard, uncomfortable truth of healthcare AI. It is really, really very, very, very important as well as very sensitive too. A bug in the recommendation algorithm, it will really take the person's life. So we have to, means all these standards had, whenever we put a new implementation, only thing is we'll have to take all these standards and we'll have to keep it safe. That's all. It is really safe once these standards are already ethical. So one is data privacy. Strict regulations regarding the security and anonymization of sensitive patient data has to be taken care of. Medical records are protected under strict international regulations like HIPAA. It's a regular standard. It has to be really, anyone violating this is under the bars. And domestically in India, under the Digital Personal Data Protection DPDP Act. So, training deep learning models require massive data, but sharing raw patient data is heavily restricted. So, when I did my PhD, I'll tell you my incident, my experience. When I did my PhD, I needed MRI scans. Okay, so MRI scans, but those MRI scans were taken from a hospital where the doctor made me sign, a radiologist made me sign on some papers which was telling that I won't be using it, I won't be misusing it for any other purpose, and this will be used only for research purposes. And they didn't give the complete data set for a particular person. The complete data set was never
Ma'am, is there any issue from your side? Like,
Yeah, it's from my side. I just clicked without knowingly. I just clicked it and it went off. Just a minute.
okay,
Just a minute. I
ma'am.
have just 3 slides to do. Just
Yeah,
click.
yeah. Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. It's okay.
I'll share my screen. Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, so I'm visible, right? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, okay. Coming to the so data privacy. So this has to be taken care of. Similarly, algorithmic bias, model trained on non-diverse um, data set can result in unequal health outcomes. That is, models uh, algorithms which are supposed to be planned, that should be used only for scholarly publications. Yes, you can take if a medical model is trained only on the data from affluent high resource city hospitals, it will perform poorly when deployed in rural clinics. So there should be a balance between the data that has been taken, because high means like something like multi-specialty hospitals, data taken from multi-specialty hospitals will be much more heavier when compared to the data that has been taken from a rural area. So that should be always biased. And people, the data which has been taken, that should, if for example, I'll tell you in very simple words, uh, if a particular, a small fever, suppose it is shigella, if it is taken for a child of 10 years, will it be same for a child of 2 years? It will be always different. So that the algorithm which we are proposing should be balanced for both these age groups. Maybe for a bigger person also, the viral fever that comes to a elderly person also, that has to be balanced. So algorithmic bias shouldn't be there when we compare all those data sets which we are taking. It should be general for everything. Whether it, obviously we say that whenever diabetic patients are taken into account, the younger people, an age group of 30 to 40, maybe in those people, the diabetic content, or whenever we take a blood result, the diabetic level is, has to be taken very carefully. It can be tolerated to plus or minus 5 in an elderly person who is above 60. So, our algorithms, which we are trying to find out, because in for diabetic patients, retinopathy, you may have heard about that. Retinopathy is one major research area where it is really checked for cataract, for long distance, as well as short sight and everything. That differs from patient to patient. In a normal person, it is different. For a diabetic patient, it is different. So, our algorithm should always take care of that. That is what I meant by algorithmic bias. Now, next is the black box problem. The black box problem, it comes into deep models, which are highly complex parameter grids. If an AI recommends amputating a patient's foot, a doctor cannot legally or ethically act on that advice unless they understand why are we doing this. So, we must actually prioritize explainable AI. Why should we do that? A black box, as we all know, it is usually used in um, air, air aeroplanes, where it gives you, it comes into existence only when the airplane goes into a faulty state, whether it crashes, something like that. Only when then the black box comes into existence. Black box is something which keeps on recording to all the parameters in the running machine. So, at what time, because the aeroplane is always on the go, it's on the air, and if it crashes down, no one is there to tell us or to make us understand why this happened. That is why it is known as a black box. And that is really evident in the black box problem also. Black box problem is simple. Why do we do this? Is it really needed? So that is where explainable AI and another extension of AI, that is where it comes into existence. It gives you your visualization techniques like SHAP and can it gives you visualizations of why we do this. And next one is the ethical challenge that comes into is regulatory compliances. Regulatory compliances, moving to a model from a local Python notebook to an active hospital ward, requires strict clinical trials or regulatory clearances as software as medical devices. So software should be used as a medical device, and that medical device should, like I said, there should be some ground reality where it has to be used. Can it be used? As I said earlier, there was an instance where I explained, like, there is a machine where you can just put your hand or the palm and it gives you the blood result. So it is not wrongly used. The content or the data which is taken using that machine, it is not faultily used, it is not unethically used. That has to be proven. So that software as a medical device should be globally appreciated. Only then you can be, that is the regulatory compliance that is used. So taking all this, these are some challenges whenever you do a project, whenever you design a machine, whenever you make a wearable device. If it has to come to the market, then all these challenges, all these clearances has to be taken care of. Only then that can be put onto the market and that can be used. And now the future trends that can be used, almost these are all into market now, or all going on now. Federated learning, it's already, again, it's all put together. Training AI models across multiple hospitals without exchanging raw patient data, preserving privacy, taking from, you have to consult a patient's, I'll put an example there, taking some patient's data from one doctor to another. Usually what we do is that it is being written on a CD and then it is being taken. But there is no time for the travel or for the transit. Then what we do? So it has to be given, or it has to be shared to another doctor, a specialty doctor or specialty hospital somewhere. So how do we do that? But in that transit, the patient's data shouldn't be lost. And there shouldn't be any change in the data also. You know that any small change in the tissue, even a small zero point 0.1 millimeter change in the tissue, by the software, it can be really harmful for the patient. So that has to happen. And that is why federated learning comes into existence. Next one is human AI collaboration. The industry is moving away from the narrative AI replacing doctors. No, it won't be done. Anything where you do, or anywhere AI is coming into existence, obviously the humans have to do that. In this, I would like to put a small light on. We are now hearing in almost every multi-speciality hospital, there are surgeries that are being done by the robots. Have you ever thought about how is this being done? If you go through some videos, or if you go through some studies which are already done, even I had a small consultation or small talk with with one of the doctors in one of the multi-specialty hospital in Ernakulam. So how do they do that? There is a small console, something like where we sit for a scan. For ultrasound scan, there is a monitor as well as there is a small device, isn't it? Similarly, there is a machine where the doctor, both hands of the doctor, it's a different console apart from the operation theater where the patient is really lying. There are two arms, the doctor's two arms are put into this machine, and the doctor can control everything from the console sitting very apart from this. Angiograms are being done like that, robotic surgeries are done like that. It is really, nowadays we see in the newspapers, it's very funny and very alerting too, that people are found with a scissor inside their body, a small piece of needle inside their body. How does that happen? How does that happen? And for so long, how does a patient survive? So some dangerous situations like this will not be available in these robotic surgeries. Robots, yes, they are well trained, they are well checked, and they are hygiene too. And that is being controlled by the doctor sitting outside. So everything goes on smoothly. Even it put the stitches, it takes stitches, it keeps clips, it keeps apart what all it has to take. Something like an angiogram. What does an angiogram do? You might be all knowing. Angiogram, a camera as well as the device or the stent is passed through the person's artery. it goes directly to the heart, it finds out where the blockage is, it takes out the blockage and puts the stent there or the device there. These are all being done earlier itself. Similarly, the small, it looks like a very small clip. The robot's hand, it looks like a very small clip, and those robots' hands are controlled by the special doctors who are sitting um, outside the operation theater. So that is a human AI collaboration. AI acts as a co-pilot to augment physicians' expertise rather than replacing them. Yes, for every medical aspect, the doctor is needed for the final decision. Don't think that even when we go there, the doctor is not looking. No, every doctor has to, they also have taken an oath, as well as they are also under the challenges and ethical considerations which we have already spoken about. There the doctor has to take care, they have to look after this, they are responsible for the robot to work inside. But the robot can directly go there, it is well trained to see from the using that camera where the area is, what it has to do. It is controlled completely by the um, doctor. And the last one is predictive healthcare. You have some predictions well in advance to know that, as I said, there are seeing the eye movement. The glasses can predict whether the person is going to have, maybe after 10 years later, he's going to have a Parkinson's or going to have Alzheimer's. So these are some predictive healthcare measures that can be well in advance found out. Coming to the conclusion, I've taken 6 minutes of time ahead of the time given to me. Coming to the conclusion, deep learning, it bridges the gap between the massive data generation and the actionable medical insights that is available now. It is going to revolutionize, as well as it is going on, preventive care, early detection and drug discovery, which is done in well advance. Continued advancement will rely on high quality data, ethical safeguarding and robust human AI collaboration as it goes on. However, now in the real world, success will not depend on building deeper models or slightly improving accuracy scores on isolated data sets. The future of AI or healthcare AI relies on high quality, diverse data sets, robust ethical and explainable safeguards, and trusted human AI collaborations. Yes, engineers are supposed to take the initiative to do all this, and as in educators, let us now design our AI curriculum and research labs to do such sort of projects. Now, I am damn sure I have done projects on deepfake, DeepSeek, GAN, drug discovery, similarly on storage part of MRIs, some projects on those also, on even on DNA computing too. The DNA structure which our pattern is inside, that works as a computer, or the data that is available to us is represented as a DNA strand, the amino acid strands, and that will be computed. That is again another way of doing it. So these can be done in projects. As educators, we should try to do all those projects in that and give a better world, or a better advancements into the world of AI in healthcare. So now I would like to thank as well as wind up my session. For any questions? Yeah, I've already said in the chat board, I got a chat box, I got a message like, will deep learning completely replace doctors in future, or will it mainly assist future doctors in better decision? Yes, the second part is correct. It is not, ma'am, sir, whatever it is, say the AI or machine learning, it is not completely going to replace anyone. Yes, again and again, because any part of histopathology or the MRI scans or whatever has with the data, as I said, 10 different brain tumor people will be having 10 different type of patterns of DNA or the tissues. Even the name given for brain tumor is just one. That diagnosis has to be finally done by the doctor. So deep learning, it will assist, it won't replace. Hope the question is answered. Next question I got is from Renju Mol. How can deep learning help stroke patients in diagnosis, treatment, and recovery? Yes, in stroke patients, the wearable devices will be always needed to be put onto, like we wear the watch. The diagnosis, treatment, and recovery. Recovery, yes, in stroke, the people get paralyzed. Now, using that, we have wearable devices like gloves. That gloves has to be now we there are existing gloves that is being used. It is being connected to the brain, and from the brain signals will be emitted in 1 second. N number of brain signals will be emitted. Many neurons will be working side by side. So studying that within no time, in real time, deep learning is really needed there. So the stroke patients, it can be diagnosed using the wearable devices. Treatment and recovery can be done using these. Getting it activated each and every time, trying to find out, that will help using deep learning because it needs real data. Now that real data will be really analyzed using deep learning, real time, on real time itself. So it gives you the answer. Hope I have answered, Renjumul ma'am. Another question I have got is from Anjali R. How do researchers handle missing or incomplete patient data while training models? In research, first of all, a prototype is made. For that prototype, patient data has to be augmented. Not complete data will be is given to you. Once we are into the result part, that we feel okay, this can be implemented correctly, then we'll have to approach the doctors or the centers where the patient data ethically can be given, and then we can try to do it once again on in their presence or in with their consent. Then that can be completely made into a paper, because you, if any medical paper you take, any medical researches which has been gone through, takes all those things will be taken, and then it will be found out uh, under the paper. In every paper there will be a disclaimer saying that this was the data that was taken was augmented, and it is being done on a for research purposes only. um, Now, I think Anjali R. ma'am, I've answered the question. Hope so. Next question is from Susan Wilson ma'am. How does WHOOP use, oh, it passed away, deep learning and AI technologies for health tracking and performance analysis? Now, talking about WHOOP, it is a band. Deep learning, again, health tracking and performance. It again works like the same. Technology is again the same as in smartwatches. It works with the underlying. It improves health. So in that WHOOP, it gives you a picture. The underlying images, or sorry, not the images. The underlying there are some sensors available in the WHOOP. Correct. Those WHOOP sensors will be always monitoring, and it gives you the pace, how it works on. The AI technologies will be implemented, and the health tracking. Basically, some magnetic fields as well as the health monitors as well as stress monitoring is being done, and it gives you some alerts. It's something like trying to rejuvenate you. It basically, I'll tell you another small example of why this is being used or what technology is being used behind that. There are some pulse points in our hands, right? And these pulse points, they give you, this is a basic thing. The pulse points, it gives you the information about what has to be done or what it can be done. So catching those pulse points and the signals that come around that can be analyzed. It can be done using the deep learning methods, and it gives you the health tracking as well as a performance analysis. Hope I have answered this, ma'am. Susan, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. Arjun sir, there is another question. How can students find research opportunities or internships in biomedical AI? Now, finding out research opportunities or internships in biomedical AI, you will have to really consult areas where these researches are going on. Obviously, that should be the answer. Amrita is one, Amrita Hospital, there is a research center there. Against Sri Chitra Tirunal Hospital in Trivandrum, there is a research center where you can find out, or many researchers on these areas are going on. CDAC is one area where internships can be replaced. So there are some areas where these research are going on. Even Bangalore, there are some companies where Samsung is one area where this research on biomedical AI works on, because Samsung is one machine where one industry where the scan machines are being made. Samsung as well as Tesla, all those machines are being generated in those companies. So every there research opportunities and internships, if through some area or through some connections, if you can do, yes, that can be done, and they approach also. They are appreciated. Arjun sir, Amrita Research, Amrita Hospital in Cochin, it gives you, as well as SCT, Sri Chitra Tirunal Hospital in Trivandrum also, they give you research opportunities. There are some openings coming out every year, and students having liking this area. Now, obviously, there is less time for them to do. It's not that you have to go there and study. You should have some knowledge about what these are being done in biomedical AI, and then go there, so that they also give you the opportunity to give you learn more and give you the ideas for this. Any questions more? I think in the chat box I have answered almost everything. Anything more, ma'am?
No, ma'am. I think you have answered all the queries in the chat box.
Okay, so on the screen is my phone number as well as my mail ID. If I would like anyone in this group, if you want to collaborate, we can have a work together. We can have some research papers also. Even your students can also approach. We can have a collaboration. I would appreciate anyone, if you want, you can come along with you also.
Ma'am, you were not audible in between. Like,
Now, did I
yeah,
answer?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, okay. No, I just wanted to say that if at all I'm not audible, I'm just telling it once again. Anyone among the participants, if you really want to do something in this area, I would appreciate collaborating with us. No problem. I would love to collaborate with you also.
Exactly.
So this is my number as well as my email ID. You can put a query. Uh, if you have something, yes, I can learn from you, as well as come to me. Whatever I know, we can have a talk. That's all from my side, ma'am. If everything is done, then
Yes, ma'am. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your session. We know that you are on a busy schedule today. Uh,
actually,
let-
in our college we had because we are autonomous from this year onwards. So we
yeah,
had an FDP, and that was in a very short notice. So sorry, participants. I'm really sorry. All my friends, I kept you waiting. I know it's already 6:15, and it's after a long working day. Thank you that I've seen some good people here, a good number of people in this evening time also. I'm sorry for being late. Actually, I couldn't skip that. I'm an HOD for this department also, so framing the new curriculum, I had to really attend. So sorry for that, and thank you for this opportunity also, ma'am.
yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank Thanks a lot for the session and your time, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your expertise with the participants. And I'm sure that everyone would have got benefited by your session. Thanks a lot, ma'am.
Hope so. Hope so. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And all the participants over here, thank you for participating in the session. And we will be seeing you next day. And that will be our last day of FTP at 12 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, and everyone. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.